Boldwood presents The Plot Twist, written by Victoria Walters and read by Jerry Allen. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. It was a rainy night in London, and I took cover in a bookshop called Book Nook that I saw was still open. The name suited the shop. It was small and tucked away in a cobbled alley. It was dimly lit, warm and dry, and books lined the walls in a haphazard fashion. Enjoying the coziness, I took my time looking around. I noticed there was only one other customer in there with me, a tall, dark-haired man wearing a shirt with his sleeves pushed up, his nose literally stuck in a book. I had to weave past him to get to the romance section, my favourite, when he looked up and saw me. "Oh, sorry. I always end up lost in my own world in here," he said. "I can see why. I can't believe I've never found this place before. It's a real gem. One of my favourites in the city." He smiled and showed off a dimple in his cheek, and I felt a weird need to make it appear again. I carried on looking, but he had my attention as much as the books. I saw him peeking at me over his book too. Then the owner called out to say he was closing, so I picked up the book I'd been looking at, an old romance I'd never seen before in a gorgeous gold hardback edition, and followed Dimple Man to the till. He had a pile of 9 books. "Let me get yours," he offered. I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" I'd wrong-footed him. Why not?" "I'm an independent woman who can buy her own books," I said, but I couldn't help but smile at his panicked expression. "Of course you are, but—" He looked around wildly, then met the eyes of the bookshop owner behind the till. "There's a discount if we buy 10 books, right?" He gave the man a pleading look. The owner laughed. "Okay, I'll give you guys a 10% discount." They both looked at me expectantly. "Unbelievable," I said, shaking my head, but I handed the book over and got a winning smile from my fellow bookworm, flashing that dimple again. God, he was cute. After he'd paid, we left the shop. When we stepped outside, the rain had eased, and the glistening pavement reflected the bright full moon above us. "Thank you for my book," I said, clutching it to my chest. "You really didn't need to do that." "You're welcome." There was that dimple again. But then he turned around, and the mystery man walked away before I could say anything else. I sighed with disappointment and went home alone. It wasn't until I opened up the book he had bought me that I saw he'd scribbled something on the first page. He must have done it when I'd been waiting for him to pay. Dinner? Then he'd written his name, Noah, and his phone number. Breaking into a wide smile, understanding then why he'd wanted to pay for my book, I realised I'd just had a real-life meet-cute, in a bookshop. It was what a romance book lover's dreams were made of. I grabbed my phone and messaged him just one word. Yes. Chapter 1. 6 years later. I was determined that my first day at Turn the Pages Publishing Company would be as good as possible. I had no idea that it would be a spectacular disaster. Everything started out smoothly enough. I woke up before my alarm as usual and got ready in an outfit I'd bought specially, a striped jumper, black trousers and ballet pumps, which made me feel smart and chic. Grabbing my handbag and my black blazer, I left my flat. I had plenty of time to make the journey from Islington to my new place of work, and for once, the London weather was playing ball. Autumn had wrapped itself over the city like an orange and gold blanket, and I was very relieved I was starting my new job in this season. I hated the stifling heat of summer in London. Autumn with its crisp, sunny mornings like this one, and the way the city became lit up with colour, the sounds of leaves crunching under my shoes, and the promise of evenings curled up with a book, hot chocolate and scented candle, always made me happy. As I walked through the park near my flat, I could see in the distance the university that I had until recently worked at. My good mood improved further when I saw my best friend Liv waiting at the edge of the park, as we'd arranged last night, waving 2 takeaway coffees at me. "The nectar of the gods," I said gratefully when I reached her and took the iced latte. I didn't know how anyone could function in the morning without one. "You need it for your first day," she replied with a smile. If we were both book characters, then Liv looked like Elizabeth Bennet, with her dark hair and hazel eyes, whereas I resembled Alice in Wonderland, with my long blonde hair and blue eyes, and the fact that I always wore some kind of headband to keep it off my face. Today I wore a pearl one. "Stevie, you look lovely. Perfect first day outfit." Liv was much more of a fashionista than me, so that made me smile. "Why, thank you. So, how are you feeling?" We walked together towards the university where we had worked together. But for the first time since we met, Liv would be opening up the library, and I would be heading in the opposite direction across London to where my new office was. "Excited, but nervous. Feels really strange to not be coming in there with you," I said, nodding at the historic university building. Liv grimaced. "I'm going to miss you like crazy." "You won't be here for much longer, though," I said after I had taken a sip of the coffee. Liv had written a fabulous romance novel and had landed a literary agent for it, so I was confident she'd have a book deal before long. "I'm so proud of you for going after your dream," she said, as we paused by the stone steps that would take her into my former place of work. "Thank you for encouraging me to do it," I replied. I'd been inspired by her writing her novel to finally apply for a job in publishing, something I had wanted pretty much ever since I'd walked into my first library as a child and read Matilda. I wanted to help bring new stories into the world, stories that would bring people the same joy they brought me. I checked the time on my phone. "I better head for the tube. You never know if there will be delays or not." "Okay, good luck. Not that you need it," she said, pulling me in for a tight hug. "It will be fabulous. As soon as you can, let me know how it's going, even if you have to sneak into the loos." "Of course. Try not to miss me too much today." "I'll have no one to gossip with, but I'll try to survive," she said with a heavy sigh. But she bucked up to give me a cheerful wave. "Knock 'em dead." "I don't want to commit murder on my first day, but I will try to channel that energy," I told her with a laugh. I watched Liv walk inside and I shook off the momentary urge to run in after her and stay where I was comfortable. I needed to do this. For past Stevie, who'd always dreamed of this day. Metaphorically pulling up my big girl pants, I took a deep breath and another sip of coffee and set off for the tube to start my new chapter. After making my way across the city, I soon stood in front of my new place of employment. It was opposite the Shard, in a sleek glass building which, after the cosy library, was a little bit intimidating. Thankfully, the tube had run smoothly, and I had arrived much earlier than I needed to. It had been just over a month since I interviewed, but finally, my first day was here. I walked around the block 3 times, and then it was close enough to the time my new manager Annie had told me to come in for, so I went through the revolving doors and up to the reception desk. I was directed to the 10th floor, so I climbed into the lift and did that automatic thing of turning to look at myself in the mirror. I was never sure why lifts had to have mirrors, because the lighting was always terrible, and you always left them worried your makeup looked clown-like. My cheeks were definitely flushed, but hopefully that was just down to the autumn breeze and not too much blusher. Stepping out of the lift, I found myself across from the Turn the Pages reception. Through double doors to the side of the reception desk was the office, which was open plan with big glass windows, and those grey carpet tiles that offices always seem to have. But what had thrilled me when I first walked in for my interview, and what made me smile all over again today, was the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves packed with all the titles they published here. Gazing up at the titles, my eyes instantly went to the ones I had read or wanted to read, mostly romances. Anything with a pastel cover was right up my street. I couldn't wait to be able to read the new ones before anyone else. As I was looking at the shelves in awe, I wasn't paying attention to the group of people hurrying past me. But when I decided I better stop gawking at books and go over to the desk, there didn't seem to be anyone manning reception. I leaned against it, wondering whether to just go on through to the office and find Annie myself, when a loud, urgent voice rang out. "Mind!" I quickly pulled my arms into my body as a man in a suit barged past, carrying a cardboard box filled to the brim with books. More people filed past me. "Unbelievable. Can we go to a tribunal, do you think?" a woman asked the group of people following her towards the lifts. "After all our hard work." The shark was worse in person than his reputation. "He loves the power. You can see it on his face. Can we sue?" I was starting to get a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. Then relief shot through me as someone familiar came out from the main office door. "Annie!" I called, waving to the tall, grey-haired woman who had interviewed me. I straightened up and threw on what I hoped was my most competent smile. "I'm so excited to—" I trailed off as she stopped suddenly, her mouth falling open in horror at the sight of me. That was not a good sign. "Oh, God, Stevie, I'm so sorry," she said, shaking her head. "What's wrong?" I asked, nervous at the sad look on her face. Annie gestured to another group of people stalking out of the double doors behind her. "We've just all heard. The company has been bought by an American firm and they're restructuring. We've all been made redundant, me included." I swallowed the huge lump that had appeared in my throat with difficulty. "You're leaving? I just can't believe they've done this." She started to walk towards the lifts again. "I'm sorry. You should go in and see what they want to do with you." "What? But Annie, you hired me and you ran the department and—" She shrugged bitterly as she joined the queue for the lift. "That evidently means nothing. Good luck, Stevie." "You'll need it," a man added darkly. I turned to the double doors, unsure whether I wanted to even go in and see what my fate was to be. I couldn't be fired on my first day, could I? Would the library take me back if I was? I looked back and saw Annie getting into the lift with her colleagues, all wearing expressions varying from devastated to pissed off. As I summoned up the courage to find out what this new company wanted to do with me, I pushed open the double doors and surveyed an office in utter chaos. People were putting belongings into boxes, phones were ringing incessantly, doors to offices slammed and reopened. Someone was crying in the corner, and outside, I could see it had started to pour with rain. This had to be the worst first day of all time. I didn't know in that moment it was about to get even worse. Chapter 2. "Excuse me," I said loudly over the noise in the office to a woman leaning against a desk sipping a coffee. She didn't look upset or furious, so maybe she hadn't been made redundant. "I'm supposed to be starting here today, and I have no idea what's going on." She grimaced. "Bloody hell. Talk about the worst day to join us, eh?" She came over and held out her hand and gave mine a firm shake. "I'm Geeta. I'm editorial director here. You're joining us in publicity?" I nodded. "Annie Leon hired me. I'm Stevie." She clucked her tongue. "Poor Annie. She's been here years. They're joining up marketing, sales and publicity, so I think they want some new blood on board. Until they sort everything out, the new boss is running everything and—" She leaned in close. "His nickname in the industry is The Shark, so we're all pretty shaken up." "The Shark?" I gulped. That did not sound at all promising. Geeta nodded towards the door at the end of the open plan office. "He's been calling us in one by one. I made the cut, thank God, but I can't believe how many haven't. If you can handle it, I'd go in there straight away so you know where you stand." Someone called her name. "Good luck," she said, and headed off to talk to a group of her colleagues. I turned towards the ominous office door ahead of me. I was half inclined to make myself a cup of coffee and wait a few hours, but I knew that was a bad idea. If I was going to be told to leave, it was better to know straight away and save myself a nervous wait. Like most things in life, ripping off the plaster was usually the best option, so I walked across the floor towards the Shark's office, singing the Jaws theme in my head, which actually diffused the tension in my body a little bit. The door burst open as I approached, and I stopped as a woman rushed out, her mascara smudged from tears. God, this really was awful. Did I even want to work here anymore? The woman hurried off and left the shark's office door open, so I supposed I had no excuse not to find out my fate. I exhaled and started walking again up to the door. Even though it was open, I knocked anyway and heard a gruff, "Enter." As I rounded the door, I saw a tall figure with his back to me staring out of the window at the rain. The office was bare except for a desk, chair and an empty bookcase. It looked like it had been stripped for him to take it over. I wondered who had to vacate it for him, and whether the shark felt guilty at all about it. When he still didn't turn around straight away, I cleared my throat. "Hi, this is my first day here and I'm wondering whether I should just turn around and go home or not," I asked in my boldest tone, because I had a sense that someone called the shark didn't do BS. "Oh, and I'm Stevie Phillips, but everyone calls me..." "Stevie," he supplied for me. I frowned, wondering how he knew that. Then he turned around. It was like it was happening in slow motion, but not like a sexy slow-motion music video featuring a shirtless man drizzled in oil, but in a "this is so huge, it has to happen in an excruciatingly slow way, so you know that everything in your life is about to change" way. Finally, the turn was complete, and my mouth fell open. "Oh my God," I said, as I recognised the shark, and not because of his so-called fearsome reputation in the industry. This recognition was personal, very personal. He met my gaze. "Hi, Stevie," he said calmly. "Hi, Stevie," I repeated, not at all calmly. "This can't be happening," I asked, addressing the universe as much as him. He sighed. "It is. I joined this morning. I am your new boss." A dun-dun-dun sound rang out in my head as my eyes flicked to the name on the desk, which I hadn't noticed when I came in. Noah Anderson. I looked back at the man in front of me as he waited patiently for me to get my head around this situation, but I doubted that I ever would. Realising I couldn't yet speak, Noah shifted on his feet and put a hand in his pocket, then took it out again. "I know this is a shock." "That's an understatement," I was able to cough out. My pulse was speeding up by the second. I wondered if there was any part of my body that hadn't turned red or sweaty. I doubted it. He nodded. "I know. It all happened so quickly and I didn't even know you'd been hired until I got here this morning. HR here has been dealing with everything directly with HR in New York." He cleared his throat. "You're not on the redundancy list. The plan is to get a sense of what is needed here, so, in the meantime, you will need to step up and take over publicity. It would be great for your career, of course, but you need to think about it, because, obviously, I will now be your manager, so I understand if..." His coolly delivered speech faltered ever so slightly. "You'd rather not." My eyebrows shot up. If I'd rather not? I wanted to scream at him. Hell no, I would very much rather not. And turn and run out of this office, leaving a cartoon character-shaped hole in the wall. But this was my dream job. And here he was telling me that I almost had a promotion straight away. I couldn't believe this was happening. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Think it over tonight. Go home now and come and see me in the morning with your decision." He turned around to look out at the rain again, signalling that our conversation was over. I was able to really look at him then. Now his eyes were no longer on me. Noah, with his tall and slim frame, his short, jet-black hair, his dark-rimmed glasses that shielded eyes the colour of chocolate, that dimple in his right cheek when he smiled, the sleeves of his shirt that were always rolled up, a line of stubble around his chin. He looked the same. A tiny bit older and rougher around the edges, and he had always been clean-shaven when I had known him. But annoyingly, the stubble, it looked good. He looked good. He even smelled good. It was a new scent, deeper, muskier, sexier. Without warning, my body reminded me of the nights I'd been in his arms, how his body had felt next to mine, the way his touch made me. Quickly, I shook my head to clear it of those kinds of thoughts. Noah might have been the best sex of my life. We might have been that close once, but we sure as hell were not now. And this sexy appearance of his was all a lie. He was good-looking on the outside, but not on the inside. I knew the space in the centre of his chest was empty where his heart should have been. Because he might be the shark to everyone in this office, but to me, he was the man who had broken my heart. I swallowed and turned to go, shook to my very core that I was seeing my ex-boyfriend again, after all this time, and that he was now my boss. The universe really did have a sick sense of humour. I walked out and closed the door behind me, and then I kept on walking, out of the office and through reception, into the lift, like I was in some kind of trance, my legs moving of their own accord. I walked out of the main revolving doors into the rain, and I kept on walking. My mind wouldn't focus on anything. I had honestly never been so shaken by something before in my life. No, that was a lie. It had happened once before. The day Noah walked away from me. And now, 5 years later, he was suddenly back again. Fuck my life. Chapter 3. When I realised where I had walked to, I pushed open the doors and leaned against the wall, taking a breath. I had trekked all across London back to the place where I felt most like myself. Probably because seeing Noah again had made me feel suddenly lost. I walked down the university corridor and through the double doors of the library and breathed in the smell of old books. There was nothing I loved more. I'd worked in libraries since I left university and took this job 2 years ago. I had really enjoyed working here, but now finally I'd made the move I'd always wanted to, into publishing. And it had so far gone completely wrong. Was I cursed or something? "Stevie, what are you doing here?" Liv poked her head around a stack of books as I walked in. "You're soaked. Are you okay?" "Not really, no. Don't suppose you're due a break? I need a coffee with about 4 extra shots in it," I said, hopefully. I brushed my fingers across the shelf and spines of the books that I knew better than the back of my hand. "Definitely," Liv said. She went over to the desk to tell Jamal she was taking a break. Then she hooked an arm through mine and steered me towards the university cafeteria. Instructing me to find a seat, Liv went off to the coffee stand. I walked to the corner table, hoping no other ex-colleagues would spot us and try to join, and waited for her to return. She came back with 2 iced coffees, and when I took a sip of mine, I gratefully tasted the extra shots she'd added. After I had taken another sip, I could face speaking. I walked in and the office was in chaos. The company has been taken over and they're restructuring, so loads of people have been made redundant, including Annie, the woman who hired me and who I thought was going to be my boss. Liv grimaced. "That's awful. Have they let you go?" "Told me to think about whether I want to come back and to tell them tomorrow. Tell him, I mean, my new boss." I looked at Liv across the table, who also happens to be my ex-boyfriend. She gasped. "What? No! Which one?" "You remember me telling you about the boyfriend I had before I started working here? The one who took a job in New York and who I never heard from again? Noah Anderson, who, I might add, is nicknamed the Shark in publishing, which is pretty damn perfect if you ask me." "Can't believe it. Oh, Stevie, I'm sorry, that is... shit." I nodded. Shit is right. He just stood there saying they wanted me to stay, to think it over, no apology, no explanation, nothing. Waltzing right back into my life like nothing happened, like he hadn't broken my heart. I cried. Now the shock of Noah standing in front of me in that office was wearing off. Anger was taking its place. He had hurt me so much. We'd been together for just over a year after meeting in a bookshop. I had thought it was the perfect romantic meeting, and not only did he love books, but he worked in publishing too. I thought I'd finally found the man of my dreams. Turned out, he'd been a nightmare instead. So, what? Am I supposed to just be cold and professional like him? Act like we didn't know everything about each other once upon a time? I can't believe he didn't say anything about the past. No apology, just said he understood if I'd rather not work there with him. Rather not. I took a gulp of coffee. I would rather stab myself with hot pokers, but this is your dream job, Liv supplied. She knew how much getting this job had meant to me. Like me, she'd always had a dream. Hers was to write a book, and so I knew she understood. It was like we had meant nothing, I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. No way, she said firmly. He loved you once. There was no way he couldn't have. I smiled. Well, that's very sweet, but even if he didn't lie for the whole year we were together, he left me in the end, so he didn't love me any more then, I sighed. This summer, I decided that I was going to focus on my career. I deleted my dating apps, I decided against any more shit dates that didn't go anywhere, or the ones who slept with me only to ghost me straight after. How has that decision turned into working with my ex-boyfriend? No, you're right, Liv said. You should stick to the plan. Focus on your career, screw Noah. You're better off without him, and I bet he regretted leaving you. You're the winner here. I don't think so, but I appreciate the pep talk. I sat up straighter. You're right about one thing, though. Why should I let Noah chase me away from the job I've wanted since I was a kid? This is young bookworm Stevie's moment, and Noah is not going to put me off. Liv beamed at me. So you'll go back? It took me years to land a job in publishing, and Noah said that I will be practically running publicity for now. So that will get me some great experience for my CV. I will treat Noah as my boss, and my boss only. I will act like we didn't know each other before. I won't mention our relationship at all, I said emphatically. And you could always look for another job in 6 months, Liv said. I tried to think about the idea of working with Noah for even 6 months, and it made my confidence shake a little bit. I tried to not remember how upset I had been watching him walk away from me the day he told me he was going to New York. But it was imprinted on my heart. Time heals wounds, sure, but it doesn't make you forget. And Noah hadn't been forgotten, no matter how hard I tried. It was not going to be easy to work together and act like I hadn't been hurt by him. But what was the alternative? You're right. I can use this to get experience under my belt, then move on as soon as I can. 6 months was nothing when you thought about the fact I'd survived 5 years without him. I nodded. This was a real shock, but I can do this, can't I? Yes, you can, Liv agreed firmly. This job is what you've always wanted. Doesn't matter that Noah's there. You'll probably hardly see him if he's the boss anyway. He'll be busy all the time, under pressure as it's all new. And he'll steer clear of you too, surely. Let's hope so. We finished our coffees and Liv had to go back to work. I went outside and thankfully saw the rain had eased, so I walked back to my flat, and when I let myself in and I was alone again, my bravado wavered a little bit. I leaned against the wall and tried to slow my heartbeat down. The sight of my flat helped a little bit. I'd moved in here soon after Noah had left. Before that, I'd shared with 2 other girls. Once I started seeing Noah, I'd spent more time at his place than at home, so it had been healing to have a space all to myself to try to get over him. I had to make a new life for myself, and I had done it, even if this flat did resemble a shoebox. I rented it from a family friend who let me pay well below the average rent in Islington, because they wanted someone they knew and trusted. The flat was just one main room with a tiny kitchen and lounge area, with room for just one sofa and a TV, then my bedroom with bathroom attached. I like to think of it as cosy, but that really was being kind. Still, it was all mine, and it allowed me to live in Islington, which I loved. I peeled off my work clothes, pulled on a comfy loungewear set, and headed into the kitchen area to make something to eat. Before I left this morning, I'd been too hyped up for my first day to eat, and now I was starving. I made a bacon sandwich, then curled up on the sofa to eat it. I pulled my phone onto my lap, and knowing it was better to be armed with as much information as I could find before I faced work again, I Googled the takeover of Turn the Pages, and specifically Noah Anderson, our new CEO. Noah rapidly rose through the ranks of US publishing giant Matthews and Wood Publishing, from editor to publisher, and then deputy CEO. Recent acquisition, Turn the Pages, is the UK's third most successful publishing company, and the takeover will net Matthews and Wood Publishing shareholders millions. Anderson has been given the job of CEO, moving back to London to take over the company, and having earned a ruthless reputation for getting results. Industry insiders predict he will take the publishing company all the way to the top. I winced at the mention of Noah's American career, knowing that it started when he left me in London. And then I felt angry. The article called him Noah Anderson, and there was no mention of the reason he worked for Matthews and Wood Publishing. Despite trying not to, our relationship flashed through my mind. After we'd met in the bookshop, Noah had swept me up in romance, and I'd fallen fast. It had been a whirlwind of dinners and drinks, book shopping and walks by the river on a Sunday, and sleeping over at his flat. His flat had a river view, and he worked at a small publishing company as an editorial assistant, a job I could only dream of. He had felt like everything I wanted. The only thing I had wondered about was, despite the fact Noah had regularly met my family and got on with them brilliantly, I'd never met his. He told me they weren't close, but I was worried he didn't think I was good enough to introduce to them. So when he told me that he was leaving for New York to start working at his father's publishing firm over there, it all clicked into place. Why he had such a lovely flat working in a junior role in publishing. Why he'd not told me anything about his parents. His father was rich and powerful, and Matthews and Wood Publishing, the company he left me for, was owned by him. Because Noah Anderson used his mother's maiden name at work to avoid accusations of nepotism. But he was, in fact, Noah Matthews. I shook off my bitterness about Noah's lie and scrolled to the next article in the Google search results. Staff at Turn the Pages had a huge shock this morning when the takeover by Matthews and Wood Publishing was suddenly announced. Everyone outside of the board of directors was unaware the company was even in takeover discussions, and many were handed redundancies as the company looks to restructure and bring over employees from America to make changes and grow the business. A shock was an understatement, I thought. I felt so sorry for everyone who had been given their marching orders so abruptly, including Annie. She had seemed like someone I could learn so much from. Now I had no idea what working there would look like. I looked at one more article. Noah Anderson, New York's most eligible bachelor, is moving to London to take over as CEO of publishing company Turn the Pages. I threw my phone down. I did not want to know about his personal life, although it did help a little bit to know he hadn't got married since he left me, and I hadn't either. My heart, left pretty fragile by him, I'm not going to lie, hadn't found anyone to fall for. I had used dating apps, said yes to party invites, gone to London's hottest bars and clubs, but despite going on my fair share of dates, there had been no one I'd really clicked with, certainly no one that I'd fallen in love with. So I had decided to concentrate on my career, and it looked like he had too. I decided to give myself one nostalgic trip down memory lane before waking up tomorrow as a cool cucumber who would treat Noah as her boss, and her boss alone. I scrolled back on my phone to the photos of our time together, which I had not been able to bring myself to delete. Pausing when I reached one of my favourites, I stared at the screen. A selfie Noah had snapped of us looked back at me. We'd been in bed together in his dreamy London flat. It was the morning after the first time we'd slept together. God, I remember that night so vividly even now. Noah had taken me by surprise in the bedroom, telling me what to do in a way that turned me on so much. I had had the best orgasm of my life. I want you on top of me so I can watch you riding me. I'm going to fuck you so good, you'll never want to be with anyone else. It had been so hot. No man had ever been like that with me, and I'd loved it. We had barely slept. We couldn't get enough of one another. When we finally did sleep, we woke up snuggled together, and that's when he took that picture. In it, we're smiling at one another, as if we're each other's whole world. When had he decided that was no longer the case? Clicking my phone to the lock screen, I decided that whatever sick joke the universe was playing on me, I was not going to let it ruin my new career. I just had to get through 6 months of pretending Noah meant nothing to me, and then I could find a new job. I could do this. I had to do this. Because there was no way I was letting him know how much I'd missed him these past 5 years. Or how much I had loved him, pretty much as soon as we'd met in that bloody bookshop. I'd spent a lifetime reading romances, and finally, I'd met my leading man. I thought I was about to get my happy ending. But real life wasn't like books, and Noah had decided I wasn't the one. He'd walked away from me, but this time, I would walk away from him. Chapter 4. My parents FaceTimed me on the way to work the following morning, wanting to know how my first day had gone. I was due to have dinner with them Friday night, so for now, I fudged the details, only telling them about the shock of redundancies at Turn the Pages and having to work under a new boss. I left out the part that my new boss was my ex-boyfriend. The thing was, Liv had never met Noah. She hadn't known us together. I wasn't friends with her back then, but my parents had. Like me, they remembered it all. They knew how much happiness meeting Noah had brought me, and how I'd been heartbroken when he moved away. They wouldn't be so quick to support me going back to work under him as Liv had been, I knew. So for now, I lied by omission, and decided I'd wait to speak to them about it face to face at the end of the week. If I could keep my nerve and stay at my job until then. At least today I was prepared for what I was going to face. I walked in through the doors to the open plan office and took in the atmosphere. People who hadn't lost their jobs yesterday had evidently decided that coming in early was the best plan, so everyone was at their desks, and the room resembled a tomb. Nothing like the office had been when I came for my interview. It had been buzzy and seemed fun then. It was clear that Noah still had the power to put a pin in happiness. I went to the coffee station and made myself a strong one, taking a long gulp before I marched through the office towards Noah's closed office door, not giving myself a chance to chicken out of this. Eyes followed my walk, and I knew everyone was wondering what I was doing. When I knocked on his door, I heard a muffled, "Enter," so I went in and saw Noah was sat behind his desk. The woman I'd met yesterday, Geeta, was standing by the door. Noah's eyes moved to me, then back to her. His face remained expressionless, so I set my mouth in a hard line, determined to be as emotionless at seeing him as he was with me. He was wearing a suit and tie today, and it looked good on him. I was pleased I'd put on my pleated dress and my favourite headband for extra confidence. Noah continued talking to Geeta as if I wasn't there, though, which was annoying. "I understand that everyone feels unsettled, but I need people to get on board. We don't have time to keep going over what happened yesterday. I want everyone at a staff meeting in the boardroom now, and I want no complaints. We have a job to get on with," he told her. "Thank you," he added in a dismissive tone. Geeta's eyes slid to me. "I'll tell everyone," she said, her voice making it clear she'd rather do anything but. She mouthed, "Jesus," to me as she slipped out and closed the door, a little bit more firmly than was needed. I didn't blame her. I stared in disbelief as Noah typed something on his laptop, clearly feeling like I could wait until he was ready. He was certainly living up to his "the shark" reputation, a reputation completely at odds with the man I had fallen in love with. "Are you serious?" I burst out after 30 seconds of him ignoring me. Noah finally looked up and raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You're just going to act like I'm not here?" "I have a lot going on." "I don't care," I snapped. "You don't have to be this rude to everyone. We all had a big shock yesterday and people lost their jobs. A little bit of empathy wouldn't go amiss, would it?" I folded my arms across my chest. "I'm staying. This is my dream job and I'm not going to let you ruin it for me. But I'm also not going to stay silent when you're acting like a—" I trailed off, my bravado faltering at the hard stare he was giving me. "Oh, don't stop now, Stevie. Tell me what I'm acting like. I'm all ears," he said, his dark eyes behind those glasses boring into mine. Even his voice sounded different. He'd been born in London, but I knew his mother was American, and living and working in New York these past few years had given him a slight New York lilt to his accent. His tone sounded deeper and harsher too. I looked back at him defiantly. I didn't enjoy confrontation, but I had longed for the chance to tell Noah Anderson exactly what I thought of him. "A dick," I replied. Noah spluttered a little bit. "I'll see you in the meeting," I said as haughtily as I could manage, and with a nod I walked out, shutting the door behind me. Noah's shocked face the last thing I saw. I couldn't help but feel a bit pleased at wrong-footing him like that. I knew that I'd planned to act like he meant nothing to me, but really, was there a need to treat everyone so badly? Nope. I was probably skating on thin ice now, but I wasn't sorry I'd told him what I thought. Geeta was waiting for me. Have you ever met someone both so gorgeous and so unbelievably grumpy? There was no way on earth I was going to admit to even knowing Noah, let alone having been in a relationship with him. No one here would want to be friends with me once they knew that. I wasn't sure I would have any respect for me either based on how he was acting now. "It's very unfair," I agreed. "So, where do I sit?" "There's a free spot behind me," she said, pulling me along with her. Then she told everyone about the boardroom meeting. There were murmurs of dissent, but they all got up and followed her. My new desk was by the window, which cheered me up a bit. After leaving my things on my chair, I trailed after the others as we walked towards the boardroom, all of us pretty fearful of what the new boss was going to say. I walked in to find the 25 members of staff left were either sitting around the long table or lined up around the walls. I joined a group against the wall. "Why does this feel like I'm back at school?" A woman with gorgeous red hair leaned over to ask. "Like we've been called to see the headmaster," a man next to me agreed. I wasn't really able to relate as I'd never been in trouble at school, but I knew what they meant. The energy in the room was like we were about to be told off. I leaned against the wall and hoped we could escape soon. Noah swept in then. All conversations ceased as he walked to the front of the room by the only empty chair left. He didn't sit down, but looked around at us. He'd taken off his jacket and pushed back his sleeves once again, like he always used to. I hated that the fact he did that showed he hadn't completely changed from the man I had known. I'd rather believed he had. "Thank you for coming," Noah said, clearing his throat. "I understand that it has come as a shock to you, the takeover and me becoming CEO," he said, his voice clear and strong in the silent room. "But this is a crucial time. We have to prove ourselves. I know there are a lot of rumours, and I can confirm this company was in trouble before Matthews and Wood Publishing bought it. The board of directors are keen to turn this into a successful arm of the business, and I am determined that we can do that. I hope you feel the same way. If not, then you should leave." There were mutterings at that, but Noah ignored them and continued. "I'm not trying to be harsh or mean or act like a dick," he continued, his eyes finding mine. His gaze sent a jolt of electricity through me, which I did not want. I looked away quickly. "But all our jobs are on the line. I'm not someone who sugarcoats anything. What's the point? We have 6 months to show enough improvement, or we will be shut down." Chapter 5. People broke out into conversations then, everyone talking over one another in shock. So, I had to put up with Noah and then I might lose my job in 6 months anyway. Bloody fantastic. And talk about pressure for us all. It did explain Noah's no-nonsense attitude a little bit more. He had to prove himself here. His job was on the line as well as ours. I reluctantly returned my eyes to him. He ran a hand through his hair. Maybe I was the only one who saw it shake slightly. I didn't feel sympathy, but it made a little more sense out of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Noah held up a hand. "Okay, I know it's a shock to hear that, but like I said, we don't have time to whinge about it. We need to get on with saving the company. I will be meeting next with each team to talk about what projects take priority and what we can start doing to turn things around. I've emailed the meeting times to you all. For now, I'll be head of sales, marketing, and publicity, so I will lead that meeting next. If you are part of those teams, stay in the boardroom, please. Thank you." He sat down and waited for everyone to sort themselves. With much grumbling and shuffling, people filed out of the room, and my colleagues in sales, marketing, and publicity stayed with me. I sat down opposite Noah and wondered whether he cared that everyone in the room hated him, or whether he saw this as just all business.